There was a time when a single photo could end a career. A glance too long, a kiss too public, and suddenly, everything changed. But behind the scenes, away from the flashing lights and front-page scandals, some couples quietly rewrote the rules. They chose each other. In this series, we look beyond the scripts and camera angles to share the real stories interracial couples who loved boldly, silently, and sometimes defiantly. Who were they? And what did it cost them? Let's find out. Iman and David Bowie, a love written in the stars. What happens when a rock legend meets a woman who redefined beauty on her own terms? In 1990, at a dinner party in Los Angeles, David Bowie laid eyes on Iman, and everything changed. "I couldn't sleep after our first date," he confessed years later. "This was my destiny." She wasn't just a model. She was a force. Somali-born, discovered in Nairobi, Iman had already walked for Versace, graced countless magazine covers, and spoken fearlessly about racism in fashion. She didn't blend in. She stood tall, regal, intentional, radiant. Bowie, by then, had become more than a musician. He was an icon who'd played with identity like it was clay, Ziggy Stardust, the Thin White Duke, the man who made being different feel like power. Together, they weren't just beautiful, they were magnetic. In 1992, they married in a private Swiss ceremony, followed by a celebration in Florence, Italy. No circus, no flash. Just two people, deeply in love, protecting what mattered. They built a life rooted in respect and quiet devotion. Iman launched her own beauty line and supported global causes. Bowie stepped back from the stage, choosing family over fame. Their love lasted until his death in 2016. 24 years of partnership, laughter, and art behind closed doors. Iman rarely speaks about it now, but when she does, it's simple. It was a real love story. If this couple touched your heart, leave a 1 in the comments. And tell us, what's your favorite Bowie era? Grace Hightower and Robert De Niro, a love with second chances. Grace Hightower was working as a hostess at Mr. Chow in London when she met Robert De Niro in 1987. He was already a legend, 2 Oscars deep, known for Taxi Driver and Raging Bull. She was raised in Mississippi, grounded and resilient, with a quiet grace. On paper, they had little in common, but chemistry doesn't read resumes. Their connection was quiet, real, and grew slowly over time. They married in 1997. A year later, they welcomed their son, Elliot. But by 1999, things unraveled. De Niro filed for divorce. What followed was a difficult custody battle, and for a moment, it looked like the story had ended. But it didn't. Away from headlines, they found their way back to each other. In 2004, they renewed their vows in a private ceremony filled with friends and forgiveness. Grace focused on philanthropy, launching a coffee brand that supported Rwandan farmers. De Niro expanded his film work and co-founded the Tribeca Film Festival. In 2018, they separated again, this time quietly, respectfully. No interviews, no scandal. Just the end of a long, winding chapter. And maybe that's what makes their love so rare. It allowed for second chances, for growth, and for grace. Have you ever given love a second try? Tell us below. This is a space for real stories. Melody Hobson and George Lucas, Power Meets Purpose. When Melody Hobson met George Lucas in 2006, it wasn't at a Hollywood party or a boardroom pitch. It was quiet, natural. She was already a force. Princeton graduate, president of one of the largest Black-owned investment firms in America. He was the mind behind Star Wars, fresh off decades of reinventing cinema. Neither needed the other. And that's what made it beautiful. They dated for years, low-key, thoughtful, away from cameras. In 2013, they married at Skywalker Ranch. Oprah was there. So was Steven Spielberg. Van Morrison played the reception. But even with that guest list, it didn't feel like spectacle. It felt intentional. That same year, they welcomed daughter Everest via surrogate. A new adventure, a new beginning. What makes this couple stand out isn't just their success, it's how they use it. Hobson became the first black woman to chair Starbucks board. Lucas pledged most of his fortune to philanthropy, focusing on education. Together, they're building the Lucas Museum of Narrative Art in Los Angeles, a billion-dollar gift to the next generation of storytellers. They rarely do interviews about their love. But Hobson once said, "We don't look alike and we don't come from the same place, but we believe in the same values." That's the heart of it. Real love, rooted in respect and purpose. Seal and Heidi Clum, a love that sang out loud. When Seal and Heidi Clum stepped into the spotlight together in 2004, the world took notice. She was pregnant from a previous relationship. He didn't hesitate. Instead, he showed up, with quiet strength and open arms. He loved not just her, but her daughter, Lenny, whom he later adopted as his own. And just like that, they became a family before they even said "I do." In 2005, they married on a beach in Mexico. Every year after, they renewed their vows, each time with a different theme, like something out of a fairy tale. Seal, the British-Nigerian singer behind Kiss from a Rose, and Clum, the German supermodel turned TV icon, seemed unstoppable. They welcomed 3 more children and built a life full of laughter, music, and devotion. Their photos always told the same story: arms around each other, children in tow, eyes smiling. But even fairy tales shift. In 2012, after nearly 7 years of marriage, they announced their separation. There was no drama, no bitterness, just mutual respect and a shared commitment to co-parenting. Heidi remarried, Seal stayed private. But their story still resonates, not because it was perfect, but because it was real. Tara Wilson and Chris Noth, A Quiet Love. Before he became the boss, Chris Noth was just a guy who co-owned a bar in New York. Tara Wilson? She worked there, young, Canadian, soft-spoken, with a warmth that drew him in. Their story didn't start on the red carpet. It started with the simple things. A glance, a conversation, something solid began to blossom. They dated quietly for years, welcoming their first son, Orion, in 2008. In 2012, they married in a low-key ceremony in Maui. No tabloid fanfare, just the ocean, close friends, and family. Tara, who is part Filipino and part African, largely stayed out of the spotlight, but behind the scenes, she helped run their bar, raise their children, and support a man whose name is often more famous for his acting than his real life. In 2020, they welcomed their second child, Keats. Their lives remained private. School runs instead of red carpets, dinners at home instead of movie premieres. But in 2021, when the allegations against Noth emerged, the silence was broken. The couple withdrew from the public eye. They made no statements. They simply closed the door together. Chaz, Hamill, Smith, Ebert, and Roger Ebert, More Than Words. They met in 1989 at a Chicago event. He, the most famous film critic in America, she, an attorney with a radiant presence and quiet strength. Roger Ebert had never married before. But when he met Chaz, everything shifted. "She gave me the strength to be the man I had always wanted to be," he once said. They married in 1992, and when illness struck, thyroid cancer that stole his ability to speak, eat, and even smile, Chaz stayed, not just as a wife, but as his voice, his advocate, his partner in the truest sense. She helped him write, speak through technology, and stay visible to the world that still needed him. Their love transcended language. It was seen in the way she stood beside him, every step, every struggle. After Roger passed in 2013, Chaz carried forward his legacy with grace. She produced documentaries, ran their foundation, and kept alive what he stood for: empathy, curiosity, and the belief that stories matter. Their interracial marriage was never the headline, but it was always the heart: quiet, steady, and profound. Do you believe love can outlast even words? Share your thoughts, or a favorite Ebert quote, in the comments. Kelly Rowland and Richard Branson, headlines without a story. She was a chart-topping star from Destiny's Child. He was a billionaire adventurer with a spaceship and an empire. So when Kelly Rowland and Richard Branson were photographed together at charity galas in the early 2010s, the world jumped to conclusions. Tabloids buzzed. Were they dating? Was this the next big power couple? In truth, it wasn't love. It was philanthropy. They crossed paths at events supporting youth, education, and global change. That was it. But the media spun stories, full of suggestion and racial undertones, asking what if when there was no what. Neither Kelly nor Richard ever responded. They didn't need to. Sometimes, silence is the clearest answer. What's worth noting isn't the rumor, but the reaction. The way we interpret proximity, especially across race and fame, says more about us than them. Kelly later married Tim Weatherspoon, with whom she shares 2 sons. Branson keeps flying toward new adventures. And this story? It never really belonged to them. Serena Williams and Alexis Ohanian, a match beyond the court. It started with breakfast in Rome. She was the greatest tennis player alive. He co-founded Reddit and had no clue who she was. Serena teased him about sitting too close. He stayed. They talked. And what followed was a love story no one expected, but everyone needed. By the time they got engaged in 2016, Serena had 23 Grand Slam titles and had broken every ceiling in tennis. Alexis? He listened, learned, and lifted her voice higher. In 2017, they married in New Orleans in a wedding fit for a queen, because she is one. Their daughter Olympia was already in the picture, bright-eyed and full of possibility. But this story isn't about fame. It's about showing up. Alexis stepped down from Reddit's board in 2020, asking to be replaced by a black candidate. He used his voice to support hers, and Serena never dimmed her light. Their love redefined power, partnership, and presence. Zoe Kravitz and Carl Glusman, the quiet spark that flickered. They met in 2016, 2 artists drawn together not by fame, but by something softer. Zoe Kravitz, daughter of Hollywood royalty, had already carved her own path with roles in Big Little Lies and The Batman. Carl Glusman, an indie actor with raw talent, brought something quieter, an emotional steadiness that matched her rhythm. They dated quietly, away from the noise. Engaged in 2018, married in 2019, at Lenny Kravitz's townhouse in Paris. The photos were glowing, candlelight, jazz, friends like Denzel and Reese in attendance. It felt timeless, intimate. Not a Hollywood spectacle, but a celebration of real connection. But not all love stories stretch forever. In 2021, just 18 months after saying I do, Zoe filed for divorce. No scandal, no interviews, just a closing of one chapter. And maybe that's what made it beautiful: the honesty, the respect, the decision to part without breaking each other. Naomi Campbell and Vladislav Duronin, glamour behind closed doors. She was the face of fashion, fiery, fearless, and unforgettable. He was a Russian billionaire, known for his glass towers and sharp suits. When Naomi Campbell and Vladislav Duronin began dating in 2008, it wasn't for show. It was for them. No red carpet declarations, just luxury jets, hidden villas, and 5 years of fiercely private love. They were often spotted in Cannes, Venice, or Kenya. He gifted her a futuristic island home designed by Zaha Hadid, shaped like the Eye of Horus. But beneath the gloss was something real, two people obsessed with excellence, with drive, with building their own empires side by side. She remained focused on activism and fashion. He kept his business thriving across continents. By 2013, they quietly went their separate ways. No press tours, no public fights, just an elegant silence. Later, a legal dispute surfaced, but even that felt like background noise. Their story was never about headlines. It was about a moment in time when two powerful lives intersected. Ty Diggs and Idina Menzel from Stage to Stillness. They met under Broadway lights. Rent, 1996. A show that broke boundaries and two actors whose chemistry spilled off stage. Tay Diggs, magnetic, smooth, quietly intense. Idina Menzel, voice like thunder, heart like fire. They fell in love while performing a story about love, loss, and identity. And somehow, their own story began to mirror the message. In 2003, they married. She rose to fame in Wicked and Frozen. He made his mark in TV and film. Their son Walker was born in 2009. Through it all, they kept their home life steady, rarely flaunting, always grounded. Yes, the media focused on their interracial marriage, but for them, it wasn't about making a point. It was about raising a family with love, humor, and respect. In 2013, after a decade of marriage, they quietly separated. No drama, no shade, just a pause in a partnership that had once lit up a stage. They continue to co-parent with grace, and when they speak of each other now, it's with warmth, not regret. Kesha Chambers and Justin Chambers, the Love Hollywood, forgot to chase. Before Grey's Anatomy made him a household name, Justin Chambers was just another model in New York City, chasing castings and dreaming big. That's where he met Kesha, quiet, steady, working as a booking agent. No red carpet, no tabloid scoop. Just two people meeting in the middle of a very unglamorous hustle. They married in 1993, long before fame knocked on their door. Over 3 decades, they raised 5 children together, Isabella, Maya, Kayla, Eva, and Jackson, and built a life far from the Hollywood spotlight. No lavish headlines, just home-cooked meals, school drop-offs, and shared glances that didn't need cameras to matter. Kesha, African-American, rarely appeared in public with Justin, but her presence was everywhere in his life. His anchor, his calm. When Justin announced his surprise departure from Grey's Anatomy in 2020, fans speculated wildly. But his reason was simple. He wanted to be with his family more. With her. With them. No drama. Just love, quietly choosing itself again. Their interracial marriage was never meant to prove a point, but in its steadiness, it did. That love can last, even in a city that feeds on spectacle. Alfonso Ribeiro and Angela Unkrich dancing through the ordinary. Most people still see Carlton Banks when they look at Alfonso Ribeiro, bow tie, sweater vest, and that unforgettable dance. But off-screen, his life has followed a quieter rhythm. In 2011, he met Angela Unkrich, a writer and diving coach from Iowa, with a bright smile and Midwest warmth. She didn't grow up in Hollywood. She didn't need it. What she brought into his life was something far rarer: normalcy. They married in 2012, in a heartfelt ceremony in Los Angeles, with Will Smith standing by as best man. Together, they built a life focused on family, not fame. 3 kids followed, Alfonso Jr. Anders and Ava, and Angela embraced both motherhood and blogging, documenting their real-life joys, road trips, birthday cakes, messy living rooms. Nothing curated, just life, honest and loud and soft in all the right places. Their interracial marriage between a black actor from New York and a white woman raised on a farm rarely made headlines. And maybe that's the win. No scandals, no drama, just partnership, steady and true. Alfonso found new joy hosting shows like America's Funniest Home Videos, but always returned to Angela and the kids as his center. Camila Alves and Matthew McConaughey. Southern soul meets Brazilian fire. Sometimes love starts with margaritas and a language barrier. That's exactly how it began for Camila Alves and Matthew McConaughey in 2006. She was a Brazilian model with deep roots and quiet strength. He was a Texan actor with charm and a streak of wild. He saw her across the room at a club in Los Angeles, offered to make her a drink, and somehow that night stretched into a lifetime. For 6 years, they dated under the radar, building a bond rooted in family, faith, and shared values. In 2012, they married at home in Austin, Texas, surrounded by candles, kids, and close friends. Their ceremony blended Brazilian warmth with Southern tradition. Since then, they've welcomed 3 children, Levi, Vida, and Livingston, and chosen a life far from red carpets, filled with camping trips, home-cooked meals, and Sunday church. Their interracial love story between a white American actor and a Brazilian woman of mixed indigenous, African, and Portuguese heritage never felt performative. It simply was. Camila co-founded a wellness platform and children's food brand. Matthew reinvented himself, won an Oscar, and wrote a best-selling memoir. But through it all, they stayed grounded. Quincy Jones and Peggy Lipton, When Soul Met Style. In the early 1970s, when Quincy Jones and Peggy Lipton fell in love, the world wasn't quite ready. He was a music legend, composer, producer, and the mind behind some of the most iconic sounds in American history. She was the free-spirited actress from the Mod Squad, one of the first white stars to embrace counterculture on TV. Their love didn't ask for approval, it simply bloomed. They married in 1974, at a time when interracial unions were still met with side eyes and whispered judgments. But for Quincy and Peggy, the focus was never on the noise. It was on their home, their daughters, and their art. Together, they raised Kidada and Rashida Jones in a household filled with jazz, curiosity, and deep conversations about identity and legacy. Rashida, in particular, carried their blend of brilliance into her own creative path as an actress and writer. Their marriage wasn't without storms. Quincy's health scare in the 70s and the relentless demands of his career put strain on their bond. Peggy stepped away from acting to care for their daughters. In 1990, they quietly divorced, but never stopped respecting each other. Decades later, Quincy still called Peggy his soulmate. And when she passed in 2019, he wrote, "She was a true angel." FKA Twigs and Robert Pattinson, A Love Surrounded by Silence. They met in 2014 quietly, through mutual friends in London. She was FKA Twigs, otherworldly, genre-defying, a performance artist who moved like a whisper and roared like a storm. He was Robert Pattinson, navigating life beyond twilight, shedding the weight of teenage fame and seeking something more honest. Together, they found it, for a while. Their love was private, but the world wasn't kind. Twigs, of Jamaican and Spanish descent, endured relentless online abuse, racist, misogynistic, cruel, for simply being with him. The headlines didn't talk about their art, their shared quietness, or the way they moved in sync. They talked about what they couldn't understand. And through it all, the couple said almost nothing. They chose grace over spectacle. In 2017, they ended their engagement without fanfare. No scandal, no blame. Just a quiet goodbye. Years later, Twigs would speak out about trauma, not from Pattinson, but from another relationship that followed. And in that contrast, we saw something clearer, that with Rob, she had been safe, even in silence. Have you ever loved someone quietly, only realizing its weight when it was gone? Drop A if this story stirred something in you. Jordan Peele and Chelsea Peretti, the laugh that turned into love. They met on Twitter. Yes, Twitter. Jordan Peele, already known for Key and Peele, was reshaping comedy with depth and satire. Chelsea Peretti, the scene-stealing Gina from Brooklyn Nine-Nine, was quirky, brilliant, and completely herself. Their online banter turned into something real, something personal, something lasting. By 2015, they were engaged. But don't expect a Hollywood wedding spread. In 2016, they eloped with only their dog as witness. No paparazzi, no press. Just two people choosing each other, quietly and entirely. In 2017, they welcomed their son, Beaumont, and continued their life in the same spirit. Low profile, high connection. Their interracial relationship between a black director and a white Jewish comedian was never used as a headline. Instead, they modeled partnership through support and space. Jordan crafted Get Out, Us, and Nope, films that shook culture. Chelsea wrote, performed, and stayed sharp in her own lane. They cheer for each other publicly, but the loudest moments probably happen at home. Tamara Mowry and Adam Housley, love that withstood the noise. When Tamara Mowry met Adam Housley, their worlds couldn't have been more different. She was a beloved child star from Sister, Sister, growing into a thoughtful voice in daytime TV. He was a seasoned journalist reporting from war zones. But in 2011, they came together. Two lives, two paths, one shared heart. They married in Napa Valley, blending Tamara's Christian faith and biracial heritage with Adam's small-town roots and winemaking family. Soon came children, Aiden and Araya, and a life full of intention. They built not just a home, but a rhythm. Vineyard mornings, family dinners, and moments away from Hollywood's fast lane. But being public meant facing judgment. Tamara opened up about the racist messages she received, comments questioning her love, her identity, her worth. Adam defended her openly, and together they never backed down. Instead, they poured their energy into their kids, their family business, and their shared belief in grace over noise. Terry and Rebecca Cruz, fighting for forever. Their story began before the fame. In the late 1980s, Terry Crews was a college football player with big dreams and a bigger heart. Rebecca, a former beauty queen and gospel singer, saw something in him, beyond the muscles, beyond the ambition. They married in 1989 and started building something rare, a life rooted in faith, family, and fierce honesty. But behind the bright smile and Hollywood success, their marriage was tested. Terry later revealed his long struggle with pornography addiction, a truth that nearly broke them. Instead of walking away, Rebecca stood firm. They went to therapy. They confronted shame. They healed together. And in doing so, they turned a private battle into a public testimony of accountability and real love. Today, they're still side by side, raising 5 children, speaking at events, writing books, showing the world that love isn't perfect. It's a daily choice. Their interracial marriage, a black man and a biracial woman, was never a media focus. But the way they've navigated hardship with honesty, that's what makes their story unforgettable. Meghan Markle and Prince Harry, love beyond the crown. When an American actress met a British prince, few imagined it would lead to one of the most talked about love stories of a generation. Meghan Markle wasn't royalty. She was biracial, outspoken, and unapologetically modern. Prince Harry was born into tradition with centuries of expectation on his shoulders. But when they met in 2016, something shifted for both of them. Their relationship moved fast, yet with clarity. By 2018, the world watched their wedding unfold under St. George's Chapel's arches, where gospel choirs echoed and centuries-old walls felt suddenly more human. Meghan wore a quiet grace, Harry, an open devotion. Together, they symbolized a turning point. But fairy tales aren't immune to pressure. The scrutiny, especially toward Meghan, was relentless, racial, and often cruel. In 2020, they stepped back from royal duties, choosing peace over protocol. Since then, they've built a life in California, raising their children and using their platform for mental health, equity, and storytelling. Their love defied tradition and reminded the world that even in castles, freedom has a cost.